Fleet Admiral Zephyr Calthan stood on the bridge of the HFY Dominion, his forearms clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the magnificent sight before him. 200 of the finest warships in Calarian space hung in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian against the starfield. Each vessel stretched over 15 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with plasma cannons, missile pods, and energy shields that could deflect the fury of a dying star. The Calarians had built their empire on the foundation of superior military might. For 3 millennia, their fleets had swept across 12 star systems, bringing order to chaos and civilization to the barbaric species that dared oppose them. They were tall, elegant beings with crystalline blue skin that seemed to glow with inner light. Their forearms moved with precise coordination, and their large, multifaceted eyes could process information at speeds that made most other species appear sluggish by comparison. Admiral, Communications Officer Thane called from his station, his voice carrying the characteristic harmonic undertones of their species. "We are receiving the scheduled reports from patrol groups 7 through 12. All sectors remain clear of hostile activity." Zephyr nodded, his expression remaining stoic. The Nexus sector had been quiet for too long, in his opinion. Their intelligence networks had been reporting strange disappearances of cargo vessels near the outer rim, but no concrete evidence of pirate activity or enemy incursion had been found. Some of his subordinates whispered about ghost ships and phantom attacks, but Zephyr had little patience for such nonsense. In his experience, mysterious disappearances usually had very mundane explanations. "Maintain current formation," he commanded, his voice carrying easily across the vast bridge, "and increase sensor sweeps to maximum range. If there are pirates operating in this region, we will flush them out." The bridge of the Dominion was a marvel of Calarian engineering. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing real-time tactical information from every ship in the fleet. The deck was a smooth, flowing surface that seemed to shift and adapt under their feet, providing perfect traction regardless of the ship's orientation. Crystalline control interfaces responded to thought as much as touch, allowing the crew to operate their vessel with an efficiency that bordered on telepathic. Lieutenant Commander Vex approached from the tactical station, her movements precise and purposeful. As the fleet's senior tactical analyst, she had studied every known enemy vessel class in their database, which contained information on over 40 different species and their military capabilities. "Admiral, our long-range sensors have detected several debris fields approximately 50 light minutes from our current position. The composition appears to be consistent with cargo vessel hulls." "Show me," Zephyr commanded. The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional representation of the surrounding space. Red markers indicated the locations of the debris fields, scattered across a region roughly the size of a small solar system. The pattern seemed random at first glance, but Zephyr's tactical experience allowed him to see the underlying structure. "These are not random attacks," he observed, studying the display with growing interest. "Look at the spacing, the positioning relative to major shipping lanes. Someone is deliberately targeting cargo vessels along this route." "Agreed, sir," Vex replied, manipulating the display to highlight the traffic patterns. "However, what concerns me is the complete lack of any distress signals. Cargo vessels typically have multiple redundant communication systems. Even if their main transmitters were disabled, emergency beacons should have activated automatically." Science Officer Kane looked up from his station, his expression troubled. "Admiral, I've completed preliminary analysis of the debris samples collected by our scout ships. The damage patterns are unlike anything in our combat database. The hull breaches appear to have been caused by weapons that operate on principles we don't recognize." Zephyr felt a slight stirring of unease, though he kept his expression neutral. In 3 centuries of military service, he had encountered weapon systems from dozens of different species. Plasma cannons, kinetic accelerators, particle beams, antimatter torpedoes, even exotic weapons that manipulated gravity or spatial dimensions. But unknown weapon signatures suggested the presence of an enemy they had never encountered before. "Elaborate, Science Officer." Kane activated his workstation's holographic display, showing a detailed scan of a hull fragment. "The metal has been subjected to temperatures exceeding 50,000 degrees, but the cutting pattern is too precise for a typical energy weapon. Additionally, there are trace elements embedded in the hull that don't match any known weapons technology. The molecular structure has been altered at the quantum level." "Could this be the result of some new weapon system developed by the Zerian Confederacy?" Zephyr asked, referring to their most technologically advanced rivals. "Negative, sir. I've cross-referenced with all known Zerion weapons technology. This is something entirely different." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Calarian Empire prided itself on having the most comprehensive intelligence network in known space. The idea that an unknown enemy could be operating in their territory without their knowledge was deeply disturbing. "Navigation," Zephyr called out. "Set course for the nearest debris field. I want to examine this evidence personally." "Aye, sir." Course laid in. As the massive fleet began to adjust its heading, Zephyr found himself thinking about the stories that had been circulating among the outer colonies. Tales of ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, of rescue attempts that found nothing but empty space where vessels had been just hours before. He had dismissed these reports as the product of overactive imaginations and the natural human tendency to create monsters in the darkness. But perhaps he had been too quick to dismiss them. The Dominion's engines hummed with barely contained power as the ship accelerated toward their destination. Around them, the rest of the fleet moved in perfect synchronization, their formation shifting like a massive three-dimensional dance performed against the backdrop of stars. Calarian naval doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and precise coordination. When they encountered an enemy, they would surround and destroy it with mathematical precision. "Admiral," the communications officer called out suddenly, "I'm detecting a faint transmission from the debris field." "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled with static, and then a weak voice emerged from the noise. It was speaking in Galactic Standard, the common language used for interstellar commerce. "Anyone out there? Ship is gone. They came out of nowhere." By the gods, what was that thing? The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. "Can you clean that up?" Zephyr asked. "Working on it, sir." The communications officer's hands flew over his controls, applying various filters and enhancement algorithms. After a few moments, a clearer version of the message played. "This is Captain Thorne of the merchant vessel Lucky Strike. If anyone receives this message, our ship has been destroyed." They came out of nowhere. Massive vessel, unlike anything I've ever seen. By the gods, what was that thing? The weapons, the speed. "It's impossible. Stay away from this sector. Warn the others." The message dissolved back into static and then silence. "Timestamp on that transmission?" Zephyr inquired. "Approximately 18 hours ago, sir." Zephyr studied the tactical display, his mind working through the possibilities. If the attack had occurred 18 hours ago and no distress signal had been detected until now, it suggested that the attackers had either jammed communications or had been operating in a region beyond their normal sensor range. Sensors expand sweep pattern to maximum range. "I want to know about every object larger than a shuttlecraft within 10 light minutes of our position." "Aye, sir." Increasing sensor intensity to maximum. As the fleet's combined sensor array reached out into the darkness, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was an irrational thought, he knew. Their sensors would have detected any vessel large enough to pose a threat long before it could approach undetected. But the feeling persisted, a cold presence at the edge of his consciousness. "Contact," the sensor operator announced suddenly. "Single vessel, bearing 27 Mark 4. Range approximately 8 light minutes and closing." "Size and configuration? That's strange, sir." The sensor return is inconsistent. "The vessel appears to be approximately 2 kilometers in length, but the mass readings suggest something much larger." Zephyr frowned. Inconsistent sensor readings were unusual but not unprecedented. Certain types of hull materials or energy fields could interfere with their scanning systems. "Put it on the main display." The holographic viewer shifted to show the approaching vessel, but instead of a clear image, they saw only a vague shifting outline that seemed to defy their sensors' attempts to achieve a lock. "Magnify." The image enlarged, but remained frustratingly unclear. The vessel appeared to be dark, angular, and covered with what looked like sensor-absorbing materials. Its design was unlike anything in their databases, following no recognizable architectural principles from any known species. "Attempting to hail the vessel," the communications officer reported. They waited in tense silence, but no response came. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, her voice tight with concern. "The vessel's approach vector is directly toward our formation. At current speed, intercept in 47 minutes. Zephyr considered his options. Standard protocol called for a warning shot across the bow of any unidentified vessel that refused to respond to communications. If that failed to elicit a response, they would disable the ship and board it for inspection. "Battle stations," he commanded. "All ships, yellow alert. Unknown vessel approaching on intercept course." Prepare to implement standard contact protocols. Throughout the fleet, klaxons began to sound as 200 warships prepared for potential combat. Weapon systems that had been in standby mode came online, their targeting systems beginning to track the approaching vessel. Shield generators hummed to life, creating overlapping fields of protection around each ship. The unknown vessel continued its approach, its speed remaining constant. On the main display, their sensor technicians had managed to resolve a few more details. The ship appeared to have an unusual hull configuration, with angular surfaces that seemed designed to deflect sensor scans. Strange protrusions along its sides might have been weapon mounts, but their purpose remained unclear. 20 minutes to intercept, the tactical officer reported. Zephyr stood at the center of his bridge, surrounded by the most advanced technology in Calarian space, commanding a fleet that had never known defeat. But as he watched the dark shape approaching through the void, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries of military service. He felt like prey. The approaching vessel continued its steady advance through space, seemingly oblivious to the 200 warships arrayed against it. Admiral Zephyr found himself studying the tactical display with growing unease. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy that would approach a full battle fleet alone, without backup, without even attempting communication. 15 minutes to intercept, Lieutenant Commander Vex announced from her position at the tactical station. Admiral, recommend we deploy forward screening elements. If this vessel is carrying some form of suicide weapon... Negative, Zephyr interrupted. Maintain formation integrity. I want to see what this ship does when it realizes it's facing the entire 7th Fleet. Science Officer Kane looked up from his instruments, his expression troubled. Admiral, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the approaching vessel. There's a field distortion around the ship that's interfering with our sensors, but underneath that, I'm reading power levels that should be impossible for a ship of that size. Explain. Sir, the energy output I'm detecting would require antimatter reactors roughly the size of those found on our largest dreadnoughts. But this vessel appears to be no more than 2 kilometers long. The power-to-mass ratio doesn't make sense according to known physics. Zephyr felt a chill run through his crystalline skin. Calarian science had advanced to the point where they could manipulate matter at the subatomic level, bend space-time to enable faster-than-light travel, and harness the power of stars themselves. But the laws of physics were still laws. Energy had to come from somewhere, and it had to be contained by something. Could our sensors be malfunctioning? I've run full diagnostics 3 times, sir. All systems are operating within normal parameters. The readings are accurate. 10 minutes to intercept, Vex called out. The vessel is not altering course or reducing speed. At this rate, it will pass directly through our formation. Zephyr made his decision. All ships' battle stations. Activate primary weapon systems. Target the approaching vessel, but do not fire without my direct authorization. Throughout the fleet, massive plasma cannons began to track their target. Energy signatures flared as shield generators reached maximum output and missile systems came online. The combined firepower of the 7th Fleet was sufficient to crack the crust of a small planet, and it was all focused on a single, small vessel approaching through the darkness. Communications, Zephyr called out. Broadcast on all frequencies. Unknown vessel, you are approaching a Calarian Empire fleet in restricted space. Identify yourself immediately and alter your course, or you will be fired upon. They waited in tense silence, but the only response was the continued steady approach of the mysterious ship. 5 minutes to intercept. Zephyr studied the tactical display, watching as the unknown vessel drew closer to his perfectly arranged formation. His ships were positioned in a 3-dimensional sphere, with overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to concentrate their entire firepower on any point within the formation. It was a classic Calarian tactical formation, one that had proven effective against every enemy they had ever faced. But something about this situation felt wrong. An enemy approaching alone should be either desperate or suicidal. Yet the unknown vessel's approach was measured, controlled, almost casual. It showed no signs of the erratic behavior typical of a damaged ship or the acceleration patterns of a kamikaze attack. 2 minutes to intercept. The vessel is entering our outer sensor perimeter. As the ship crossed into their close-range sensor grid, the science station suddenly erupted in activity. Kane's hands flew over his controls as data streamed across his displays. "Admiral!" Kane called out, his voice tight with amazement and fear. "I'm getting detailed scans now. Sir, this ship? Its whole composition includes materials that shouldn't exist. I'm detecting elements with atomic numbers beyond anything on the periodic table, but they appear to be stable. The engineering principles, it's like looking at technology that's centuries ahead of ours." "That's impossible," Vex interjected from the tactical station. "No known species has access to stable transuranium elements." "That's just it," Kane replied, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "This isn't from any known species." The main display shifted as their enhanced sensors finally achieved a clear lock on the approaching vessel. What they saw defied their understanding of spacecraft design. The ship appeared to be constructed from a single piece of metal with no visible seams or joints. Its surface was a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns covered the whole, following mathematical principles that hurt to look at directly. 1 minute to intercept. The vessel was close enough now that they could see it with the naked eye through the bridge's viewing ports. It moved through space with an eerie silence, its approach vector taking it directly toward the center of their formation where the Dominion waited. "Admiral!" the communications officer called out suddenly. "I'm detecting a transmission from the unknown vessel. Put it through." The bridge speakers activated, and for a moment there was only silence. Then a voice emerged from the static, speaking in perfect galactic standard with an accent none of them recognized. "Calarian vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Nemesis. You are in violation of the Terran quarantine zone established under the Sol Accords of 2387. You have 30 seconds to alter course and withdraw from this sector." The bridge fell into stunned silence. Zephyr felt as though the deck had shifted beneath his feet. Earth? Terra? Those were ancient names from the old databases, references to a species that had supposedly destroyed itself in primitive nuclear wars thousands of years ago. "Impossible," Vex whispered. "The humans have been extinct for millennia." But even as she spoke, Zephyr was remembering fragments from old intelligence reports. Stories of ghost ships appearing at the edges of known space, vessels that moved faster than anything in their databases, attacks that left no survivors, and no evidence except for debris that defied analysis. The transmission continued, the human voice calm and professional despite the overwhelming odds she faced. "Your vessels are equipped with weapon systems that violate multiple interstellar treaties regarding the use of plasma-based weapons against civilian populations. Your Empire's expansion into contested space has resulted in the destruction of 14 neutral colonies and the displacement of approximately 40 million sentient beings." Zephyr found his voice. "This is Fleet Admiral Zephyr Calthan of the Calarian Empire 7th Fleet. You are a single vessel facing 200 of our finest warships. Withdraw immediately, and we may consider allowing you to survive this encounter." There was a pause, and then something that might have been amusement entered the human captain's voice. "Admiral, I appreciate the warning. However, you seem to be operating under several misconceptions. First, you assume I'm alone. Second, you assume your weapons can damage my ship. Third, and most importantly, you assume I'm here to fight. Then state your intentions. I'm here to deliver a message. Humanity has been watching your expansion with growing concern. Your Empire's military doctrine represents a threat to galactic stability that we cannot ignore. This is your one and only warning. Withdraw your forces to your original 12 systems and cease all aggressive expansion or face the consequences." Zephyr felt his four hands clench into fists. A single ship, regardless of its technology, was threatening the entire Calarian Empire. The audacity was beyond comprehension. "You dare threaten us? You're outnumbered 200 to 1. "Actually, Admiral, you're the ones who were outnumbered." Before Zephyr could ask what she meant, the science officer's station erupted in alerts. Kane's voice rose to near panic levels as he read his displays. "Admiral, I am detecting massive sensor contacts throughout the system. Dozens of vessels decloaking simultaneously. They're everywhere." The main tactical display shifted to show the broader star system, and Zephyr's blood turned to ice. Ships were appearing out of nowhere, their stealth systems deactivating to reveal their presence. 50, 100, 200 vessels materialized from the darkness, each one similar in design to the ship that had approached them. But these ships were larger, much larger. Some stretched over 10 kilometers from bow to stern, their hulls bristling with weapon systems that his tactical computers couldn't identify. They had surrounded the entire Calarian fleet without being detected, positioning themselves at optimal firing angles with mathematical precision. "How is this possible?" Vex whispered, her four hands shaking as she tried to update the tactical display. "Our sensors should have detected them light minutes away." Captain Chen's voice continued from the speakers, still maddeningly calm. "Human stealth technology has advanced considerably since your databases were last updated, Admiral. We've been observing your fleet since you entered this sector." Zephyr stared at the display, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. His fleet, which had seemed so powerful just minutes ago, now appeared tiny and vulnerable in the center of a vast web of enemy vessels. The tactical situation had reversed completely without a single shot being fired. "What do you want from us?" he asked, and hated himself for the note of defeat he heard in his own voice. "Nothing complex, Admiral. Turn your ships around and go home. Forget about this sector, forget about expansion beyond your current borders, and forget about the idea that might makes right in this galaxy. And if we refuse?" There was a long pause before Captain Chen answered, and when she did, her voice carried a weight that made the bridge seem colder. "Admiral, in the old days on Earth, we had a saying. Speak softly and carry a big stick. You've just seen the stick. I'd suggest you don't make me use it." On the tactical display, the human ships held their positions, weapons powered but not yet targeting the Calarian fleet. They waited with the patience of apex predators, confident in their superiority and willing to give their prey one last chance to make the right choice. Zephyr looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, seeing his own shock and fear reflected in their eyes. For 3,000 years, the Calarian Empire had expanded through the galaxy, secure in their military supremacy. Now, in the span of a few minutes, they had discovered that they were no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. They weren't even close. "Admiral," Vex whispered urgently, "what are your orders?" Zephyr stared at the tactical display, watching as more human ships continued to decloak throughout the system. The count was approaching 300 now, each one representing technology that his science officers claimed was centuries ahead of their own. He thought about his empire, his people, the 3,000 years of expansion and conquest that had brought them to this moment. He thought about his duty as a fleet admiral, his oath to protect Calarian interests throughout the galaxy. And then he thought about the 40 million displaced beings that Captain Chen had mentioned, the 14 destroyed colonies, and the cargo vessels that had been disappearing in this sector. He thought about the possibility that his empire had finally encountered something that could stop them. "Stand down weapons," he ordered quietly. "Sir?" Vex looked at him in shock. "Stand down weapons," he repeated, louder this time. "All ships reduced to yellow alert status. We're withdrawing from this sector." As his orders were transmitted throughout the fleet, Zephyr watched the human ships on his display. They didn't move, didn't alter their formations, didn't do anything except continue their silent watch. But somehow, their very stillness conveyed more threat than any aggressive maneuver could have. "Captain Chen," he said into his communication system, "we will comply with your request. But this isn't over." Her reply came back immediately, and there was definitely amusement in her voice now. "Oh, Admiral, I certainly hope it is, for your sake." The journey back to Calarian space took 3 standard weeks, and every moment of those weeks felt like an eternity to Fleet Admiral Zephyr Calthan. The 7th Fleet maintained its formation as they traveled through hyperspace, but the precision and pride that had once characterized their movements were gone. In their place was a haunted quality, as if each ship carried the weight of a terrible revelation. Zephyr stood in his private study aboard the Dominion, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace through his viewport. The room was decorated with mementos from a lifetime of military service, campaign medals from dozens of successful operations, holographic displays showing the worlds his fleet had brought into the Empire, and ceremonial weapons gifted by grateful colonial governors. Now all of these achievements felt hollow, meaningless in the face of what they had encountered. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to his quarters. "Come," he called without turning from the window. Lieutenant Commander Vex entered, her usual confidence replaced by visible uncertainty. In the weeks since their encounter with the human fleet, she had been working tirelessly to analyze every piece of data they had collected, trying to understand exactly what they had faced. "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of the encounter," she said, offering him a data tablet. "The results are disturbing." Zephyr took the tablet and began scanning through the information. What he read made his crystalline skin grow cold with implications that reached far beyond their single encounter. "According to our sensors," Vex continued, "the human ships weren't just technologically superior to ours. They were operating on principles that our science doesn't recognize. Their power generation systems appear to tap directly into quantum vacuum energy. Their hulls are constructed from materials that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and their weapons—" She paused as if struggling to find words for what she had discovered. "Their weapons appear to be capable of manipulating matter at the subatomic level. Admiral, a single shot from one of their main guns could theoretically disassemble every atom in one of our dreadnoughts." Zephyr set down the tablet and finally turned to face his tactical officer. "What about their numbers?" "How many ships do you estimate they have?" "That's the most troubling part of my analysis," Vex replied. Based on their deployment patterns and the sophistication of their coordination, I believe we encountered only a single battle group. Human military doctrine appears to emphasize small, highly efficient units rather than large fleets. If this was just one battle group and they have others. She didn't need to finish the thought. If the humans had multiple battle groups of similar capability scattered throughout the galaxy, they could challenge every major power simultaneously. Have you shared this analysis with anyone else? No, sir. Given the sensitive nature of the information, I thought it best to report directly to you first. Zephyr nodded approvingly. The last thing they needed was panic spreading through the fleet before they could properly assess the situation. Classify this report at the highest security level. I'll need to brief the Imperial Council personally. After Vex left, Zephyr returned to his contemplation of the swirling hyperspace outside his window. He thought about Captain Sarah Chen and her casual confidence as she delivered humanity's ultimatum. There had been no anger in her voice, no hatred or desire for conquest. She had spoken like someone delivering a simple statement of fact, as if the outcome of their encounter had been predetermined. The more he considered their conversation, the more he realized that the humans had been trying to avoid a confrontation. They could have simply destroyed his entire fleet without warning, but instead they had chosen to reveal themselves gradually to demonstrate their superiority without bloodshed. It suggested a level of restraint that was almost incomprehensible given their obvious military advantage. 3 days later, the 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Calarian home system. The sight of their capital world, Kaltos Prime, hanging like a blue-green jewel among the stars, should have filled Zephyr with a sense of homecoming. Instead, he felt only a growing dread at what he would have to report to the Imperial Council. The communication came within minutes of their arrival. Admiral Calthan, this is Imperial Control. You are to proceed immediately to the capital. The Council is waiting for your report. Understood, Control. Transferring command to Captain Morax aboard the Vigilant. The Dominion will proceed to the capital alone. As his flagship separated from the fleet and began its approach to Kaltos Prime, Zephyr found himself thinking about the history of his people. The Calarians had built their empire on the belief that they were destined to bring order to the chaos of the galaxy. Their superior intellect, advanced technology, and military prowess had seemed to confirm this destiny time and again. Now, in the space of a single encounter, that entire worldview had been shattered. The Imperial Palace was a magnificent structure that rose from the surface of Kaltos Prime like a crystal mountain, its spires reaching high into the atmosphere. Zephyr had visited it many times over his career, usually to receive commendations and new assignments. This time, he approached it with the weight of defeat on his shoulders. The council chamber was a vast circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the stars above. 12 members of the Imperial Council sat in elevated seats arranged around the perimeter, their crystalline forms glowing with the soft bioluminescence that indicated their advanced age and wisdom. At the center of the room, a single chair waited for him. Fleet Admiral Calthan, spoke Council Leader Arcturus, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. You returned to us earlier than expected and without having completed your mission in the Nexus sector. Explain. Zephyr remained standing rather than taking the offered chair. What he had to say was too important to deliver while sitting down. Honored counselors, the 7th Fleet encountered an unknown enemy in the Nexus sector. They identified themselves as humans from the planet Earth. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Counselor Lyra leaned forward, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the starlight from the dome above. The humans destroyed themselves in primitive nuclear wars over 2,000 years ago. Our historical records are quite clear on this point. Our historical records, Zephyr replied carefully, appear to have been incomplete. He spent the next hour providing a detailed account of their encounter with the human fleet. He described the technological superiority they had demonstrated, the ease with which they had surrounded and outmaneuvered the entire 7th Fleet, and the ultimatum they had delivered. When he finished, the chamber fell into a silence so complete that the only sound was the soft humming of the palace's environmental systems. You're certain of these observations? Asked Counselor Thane, his voice heavy with implications. I've brought complete sensor records and tactical analyses, Zephyr replied, activating a holographic display that showed the encounter in 3 dimensions. The evidence is undeniable. The council members studied the holographic replay in tense silence. Zephyr watched their faces as they observed the human ships materializing from nowhere, surrounding the most powerful fleet in Calarian space with casual efficiency. He saw shock, disbelief, and then a growing understanding of what this meant for their empire. Their demand, Council Leader Arcturus said finally, that we withdraw to our original 12 systems and cease expansion. What is your assessment of their ability to enforce this demand? Zephyr had been dreading this question, but he owed the Council an honest assessment. Based on what we observed, they could destroy our entire fleet without suffering significant casualties. If they have multiple battle groups of similar capability, they could challenge our entire empire simultaneously. Counselor Vex spoke up from her position near the back of the chamber. What do we know about their intentions? Are they planning to invade our territory, or are they simply trying to contain our expansion? Captain Chen was quite specific about their demands, Zephyr replied. They want us to return to our original borders and cease aggressive expansion. They made no mention of invasion or occupation. It appears they're trying to establish some form of galactic equilibrium. And if we refuse? Zephyr thought about the casual confidence in Captain Chen's voice, the way she had spoken about humanity's advanced technology as if it were simply a fact of nature. I believe they would make good on their threat. The chamber fell silent again as the council members contemplated their options. For 3,000 years, the Calarian Empire had expanded through the galaxy virtually unchecked. The idea of accepting limits imposed by another species was almost incomprehensible. There is another consideration, Councilor Lyra said slowly. If the humans have this level of technology, what other species might possess similar capabilities? How many other powers are out there that we haven't encountered yet? It was a chilling thought. If humanity represented just one of several advanced species in the galaxy, then the Calarians might be nowhere near as dominant as they had believed. They might in fact be little more than an emerging civilization that had been allowed to expand only because the truly powerful species hadn't bothered to stop them. What are your recommendations, Admiral? Council Leader Arcturus asked. Zephyr had been preparing for this question during the entire journey home. Honored Counselors, I believe we have 3 options. First, we can ignore their ultimatum and continue our expansion, risking a war we cannot win. Second, we can comply with their demands and accept the borders they've imposed. Third, we can attempt to negotiate with them, perhaps offering some form of compromise. And which option do you recommend? I recommend we comply with their demands, Zephyr said without hesitation. At least initially. We need time to study their technology, to understand their capabilities better, and to develop countermeasures if possible. A direct confrontation now would be suicide. Councillor Thane leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. You're asking us to abandon 3 millennia of expansion and accept limits imposed by a species we thought was extinct. The political implications alone, the political implications of extinction are far worse, Zephyr replied bluntly. The council debated for several more hours, examining every aspect of the situation from multiple angles. They discussed the possibility of forming alliances with other species, the feasibility of developing new technologies to counter the human advantage, and the potential consequences of either compliance or defiance. Finally, Council Leader Arcturus called for a vote. All in favor of accepting the human ultimatum and withdrawing our forces to the original 12 systems? 8 of the 12 council members raised their hands. The motion is carried, Arcturus announced. Admiral Calfin, you will begin immediate coordination for the withdrawal of our forces from contested territories. All expansion operations are suspended indefinitely. As Zephyr left the Imperial Palace, he looked up at the stars visible through the atmospheric dome and wondered what other surprises were waiting out there in the darkness. The galaxy had suddenly become a much larger, more dangerous place than any of them had imagined, and somewhere in that darkness, the humans were watching, waiting to see if the Calarian Empire would keep its word. 6 months had passed since the Calarian Empire began its withdrawal from the contested territories, and the process was proving more difficult than anyone had anticipated. What had seemed like a simple matter of pulling back military forces had revealed the true complexity of an empire that had grown over 3 millennia. Trade routes, colonial administrations, mining operations, and diplomatic relationships all had to be carefully dismantled or transferred. Admiral Zephyr Calthan found himself at the center of this massive undertaking, coordinating not just the military withdrawal but also serving as the primary liaison between the Imperial Council and the various colonial governments that were suddenly finding themselves abandoned by their parent empire. He stood in the strategic planning center of the Calarian Defense Ministry, studying holographic displays that showed the Empire's shrinking borders. Red zones indicated territories that had already been evacuated, yellow zones showed areas currently under withdrawal, and green zones marked the 12 core systems that would remain under Calarian control. The sight was both humbling and terrifying. "Admiral," called Director Zine from her position at the Intelligence Analysis Station, "we're receiving some unusual reports from our reconnaissance units in the outer territories." Zephyr moved to her station, noting the concern in her expression. Director Zine was one of the most experienced intelligence analysts in the Empire, and her reports had always been reliable. What kind of reports? Sir, our scouts have been observing human activity in several of the systems we've evacuated. But they're not doing what we expected. Elaborate. Instead of occupying the territories we've abandoned, they appear to be cleaning them up. Our observation posts have recorded human vessels removing orbital debris, restoring damaged infrastructure, and providing aid to displaced populations. In the Zirian system, they've actually been rebuilding the colony we damaged during our occupation. Zephyr frowned, studying the intelligence reports that Zen displayed on her screen. The data showed human ships working alongside civilian vessels from dozens of different species, coordinating relief efforts with an efficiency that spoke of long experience in such operations. This doesn't make sense, he said. If they wanted to control these territories, why drive us out only to rebuild what we destroyed? That's not the strangest part, Zen continued. We've also detected communication traffic between human vessels and representatives from species we've never encountered before. It appears that humanity is part of a much larger network of advanced civilizations. She activated a three-dimensional map that showed the known galaxy, with various regions marked in different colors. Based on our analysis of intercepted communications and observed ship movements, we believe there are at least 7 major powers operating in this region of the galaxy alone. The humans appear to be part of what they call the Galactic Coordination Council. Zephyr stared at the map, feeling a growing sense of vertigo as the implications sank in. Are you telling me that our entire expansion has been taking place in a region controlled by this council? It appears so, sir. More disturbing, our analysis suggests that these powers have been aware of our expansion for centuries. They've been allowing us to grow. Allowing us? The pattern is clear once you know what to look for, Zen explained, manipulating the display to show the Calarian expansion over time. Every major battle, every successful conquest, every technological breakthrough that enabled our expansion, they all occurred in regions where these advanced powers had minimal presence. It's as if we were being guided into a specific area of space. The realization hit Zephyr like a physical blow. They've been managing us. Like gardeners tending a crop. That appears to be the case. And based on recent communication intercepts, our expansion into the contested territories crossed a threshold they had established. That's why they intervened. Zephyr turned away from the display, his mind reeling with the implications. Everything he had believed about Calarian superiority, about their destiny to rule the galaxy, had been an illusion. They weren't conquerors. They were children who had been allowed to play with toys until they reached for something too dangerous. What else have you discovered about this council? Zine brought up another display, this one showing ship designs and technological signatures from the various species they had identified. Each member appears to specialize in different aspects of galactic management. The humans seem to focus on military intervention and conflict resolution. The Etherians, based on our limited observations, appear to manage trade and economic development. The Crystalline Collective seems to handle communications and information networks. How many species are we talking about? At least 12 major powers, possibly more. Sir, we may be looking at a galactic civilization that's been operating for thousands of years while we've been completely unaware of its existence. Zephyr studied the display, trying to comprehend the scope of what they had discovered. What's their ultimate goal? What do they want? Based on the patterns we've observed, it appears they're trying to maintain stability while allowing younger species to develop naturally. They intervene only when a species becomes a threat to galactic equilibrium. And that's what we became. Yes, sir. Zephyr spent the next several hours reviewing the intelligence reports, each new piece of information adding to the picture of a galaxy far more complex and organized than anyone in the Calarian Empire had imagined. The humans weren't just technologically superior. They were part of a vast network of advanced civilizations that had been shaping galactic development for millennia. A communication alert interrupted his review. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Zirian system. It's from Captain Chen. Zephyr felt his skin cool at the mention of the human captain who had delivered their ultimatum. Put her through. The holographic communication system activated, and Captain Chen's image appeared before him. She looked exactly as he remembered. Professional, confident, and carrying an air of quiet authority that seemed to fill the room despite being just a projection. Admiral Calthan, she said with a slight nod of acknowledgement. I trust your withdrawal is proceeding smoothly. Captain Chen, I must admit I'm surprised to hear from you directly. I'm contacting you because we've observed some concerning activity from certain factions within your empire. It appears that not everyone is supportive of the Council's decision to comply with our ultimatum. Zephyr felt a chill of apprehension. What kind of activity? We've detected the construction of several hidden military facilities and asteroid belts within your core systems. Advanced weapons research, experimental ship designs, and what appears to be an attempt to reverse engineer some of the technology you observed during our encounter. The implications were staggering. Are you suggesting that members of my own government are preparing for a resumption of hostilities? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Admiral. I'm going to share something with you that might help you understand the situation better. The display changed to show a three-dimensional map of the entire galaxy, with thousands of points of light representing different civilizations and species. What you're looking at is the current state of galactic civilization. Every light represents a species that has achieved interstellar travel. The different colors indicate their level of technological development and their relationship to the Galactic Coordination Council. Zephyr studied the map, overwhelmed by the sheer number of civilizations represented. There are so many. Over 40,000 species have achieved interstellar flight in this galaxy alone, Chen confirmed. Of those, approximately 1,200 have developed technology comparable to what you observe from our fleet. The Calarian Empire represents one of about 3,000 species that we classify as emerging powers. Emerging powers? Species that have advanced beyond their home systems but haven't yet reached full technological maturity. The Council's job is to guide these species toward peaceful integration with the broader galactic community. And if they refuse to integrate? Chen's expression grew serious. Then we do what's necessary to protect the billions of peaceful species who make up the majority of galactic civilization. Zephyr understood the implication.
How many species have you
dealt with? In the past 1,000 years? 17. Some chose to comply with council guidelines and eventually became full members. Others... She paused. Others chose a different path. What happened to them? They no longer pose a threat to galactic stability? The simple statement carried a weight that made Zephyr's crystalline skin grow cold. 17 entire civilizations, presumably with billions of individuals, had been eliminated for refusing to accept the Council's authority. Why are you telling me this? Because I like you, Admiral. You showed wisdom and restraint during our first encounter. You made the difficult choice to put the welfare of your people above personal or imperial pride. That's rare among military leaders of emerging civilizations. But you're warning me that others in my government don't share that wisdom. Exactly. The faction led by Councillor Thaney has been in communication with several other species that the Council has identified as potential threats. They're attempting to form what they call an alliance of free peoples to resist Council authority. Zephyr felt the ground shifting beneath his feet once again. How do you know this? Admiral, one of the advantages of having technology that's centuries ahead of your opponents is that their secure communications aren't actually secure. We've been monitoring their activities since the day you returned to Calarian space. You've been spying on us. We've been protecting ourselves and, by extension, protecting you from the consequences of your own government's actions. Chen leaned forward slightly, her expression growing more intense. Admiral, the Council has given your people a chance to join the galactic community peacefully. That chance is still available. But if Councillor Thane's faction succeeds in their plans, if they actually attempt to challenge Council authority with their alliance, the response will be swift and final. What do you want me to do? Stop them. Use your influence, your credibility with the military, your relationship with the more reasonable members of the Imperial Council. Convince them that the path Thane is advocating leads only to the extinction of your species. Zephyr was quiet for a long moment, considering the impossible position he found himself in. On one hand, he was being asked to actively work against his own government to prevent them from pursuing what many would consider a patriotic resistance to foreign domination. On the other hand, he was looking at the potential extinction of his entire species if that resistance succeeded. If I agree to help you, what guarantee do I have that the Council won't simply eliminate us anyway once the immediate threat is resolved? The same guarantee I gave you 6 months ago, Chen replied. The Council doesn't want to destroy emerging civilizations. We want to guide them toward peaceful integration. The Calarian Empire has the potential to become a valuable member of the galactic community. Your people are intelligent, resourceful, and capable of great achievements when properly directed. And if we refuse integration entirely? If we simply want to be left alone? That's also an option. Several hundred species have chosen isolation over integration. They maintain their independence within their core territories and avoid any actions that might threaten galactic stability. It's a perfectly acceptable choice. Zephyr studied the holographic map that still floated between them, showing the vast scope of galactic civilization. The idea that his people could find a place in that larger community was appealing, but it would require abandoning everything they had believed about their own superiority and destiny. "I need time to consider this." "Of course, but don't take too long, Admiral." Thane's faction is moving quickly, and our patience has limits. The transmission ended, leaving Zephyr alone with the holographic map and the weight of an impossible decision. Outside the Ministry building, the capital city of Kaltos Prime continued its daily routine, its citizens unaware that the fate of their entire civilization might depend on the choice he was about to make. The emergency session of the Imperial Council was unlike any in Kalarian history. Zephyr stood before the 12 council members, but this time the chamber was filled with additional observers, military commanders, senior diplomats, and representatives from various colonial governments. The stakes were too high for closed-door deliberations. 3 weeks had passed since his conversation with Captain Chen, and during that time Zephyr had conducted his own investigation into the activities of Councillor Thane's faction. What he had discovered was even more alarming than Chen had suggested. Not only were they building hidden military facilities and attempting to reverse engineer human technology, but they had also made contact with 6 other species that were similarly opposed to the Galactic Coordination Council's authority. "Honored councilors," Zephyr began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "I have uncovered evidence of a conspiracy within our own government that threatens the very survival of our species." A murmur of shock rippled through the assembled observers. Councillor Thane, sitting in his elevated position among the council members, maintained his composure, but Zephyr could see the tension in his crystalline features. "That's a serious accusation, Admiral," Council Leader Arcturus replied. "Present your evidence." Zephyr activated the holographic display system, showing the detailed intelligence reports he had compiled. Over the past 6 months, certain members of this council have authorized the construction of 12 hidden military installations in asteroid belts throughout our core systems. These facilities are producing weapons based on reverse-engineered human technology and constructing a new class of warship designed specifically to counter human military capabilities. The display showed detailed scans of the hidden facilities, their locations carefully chosen to avoid detection by routine patrols. The technology being developed was crude compared to what they had observed from the human fleet, but it represented a significant advancement beyond standard Kalarian weapon systems. Furthermore, Zephyr continued, this same faction has been in communication with representatives from 6 other species, the Zorvak Hegemony, the Theta Compact, the Iron Lords of Vega, the Crystalline Separatists, the Neo-Zeran Republic, and the Free Colonies of Alpha Centauri. Together they are planning what they call the Second Galactic War. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as the implications of his revelation sank in. A Second Galactic War implied that there had been a first one, something that had been hidden from most of the galactic community. "Impossible," Councillor Lyra protested. "There has never been a galactic war in recorded history. Because the first one was ended so quickly that most species never learned it had begun," Zephyr replied grimly. He manipulated the display to show historical data that Captain Chen had provided him. Approximately 800 years ago, a coalition of 23 species attempted to challenge the authority of what was then called the Elder Council. The war lasted exactly 47 standard days. What happened to the coalition? 15 of the species involved chose to surrender and accept council authority. They still exist today as integrated members of the galactic community. The other 8 chose to fight to the end, and they no longer exist. The silence that followed was deafening. Zephyr could see the fear in the faces around him as they contemplated the idea that entire species could be simply erased from existence by the advanced powers of the galaxy. Councillor Thane finally spoke, his voice tight with anger and defiance. "So we should simply accept slavery? Bow down to these self-appointed guardians and abandon any hope of determining our own destiny?" "That's not what I'm suggesting," Zephyr replied. "Captain Chen made it clear that integration into the galactic community doesn't mean slavery. It means accepting certain limitations on aggressive expansion while gaining access to advanced technology, trade networks, and protection from genuine threats." "Protection from threats like ourselves, you mean? Protection from threats like the Devourers." Zephyr activated another part of the display, showing intelligence data that few in the chamber had ever seen. The Galactic Coordination Council isn't just about managing emerging civilizations. Their primary purpose is defending against extragalactic threats that most species don't even know exist. The Devourers are one such threat, a species of nomadic destroyers that consumes entire galaxies and moves on. They've already destroyed 3 neighboring galaxies and are currently approaching the galactic rim. The display showed long-range sensor data depicting massive structures moving through the void between galaxies. Each structure was the size of a solar system, and there were hundreds of them advancing in a coordinated formation. The Council estimates that the Devourers will reach our galaxy within the next 500 years, Zephyr continued. Their entire military structure is designed to coordinate the defense against that threat. Species that refuse to accept Council authority are seen as potential weak points in the galactic defense network. Councillor Thane leaned forward, his expression skeptical. This could all be elaborate propaganda designed to make us accept their dominance. How do we know any of this is real? Because 3 days ago, I was invited aboard a human observation post to see the evidence for myself. Zephyr had kept this part of his investigation secret, even from his closest advisors. The meeting with Captain Chen had been arranged through carefully encrypted communications, and he had traveled to the rendezvous point alone in a small, unmarked shuttle. The humans have constructed monitoring stations throughout the galactic rim, he explained. Their purpose is to track the Devourer advance and coordinate early warning systems. I've seen their data, I've spoken with their scientists and military planners. The threat is real, and it's coming whether we're ready for it or not. And what role would the Calarian Empire play in this defense? That depends on the choices we make here today. If we choose integration, we would become part of the defensive network. Our military would be retrained and equipped with advanced technology. Our industrial capacity would be enhanced to support the war effort. Our people would be relocated to safer regions of the galaxy as the Devourers approach. And if we choose resistance, then we'll face the same choice that confronted the 8 species in the last galactic war: surrender or extinction. The chamber fell silent again as the council members and observers contemplated their options. Zephyr could see the internal struggle playing out on their faces. Everything they had believed about their place in the galaxy had been revealed as an illusion, but the alternative, accepting a subordinate role in a vast galactic hierarchy, was almost equally difficult to accept. Council leader Arcturus spoke into the silence. You mentioned that isolation was also an option. What would that entail? The Council would establish a protective zone around our core systems, Zephyr explained. We would be prohibited from expanding beyond our current borders or developing certain types of advanced technology. In exchange, we would be left alone to govern ourselves as we see fit. When the Devourers arrive, we would be evacuated to protected regions, along with other isolated species. Evacuation implies abandoning our worlds. Yes. The Council's strategy involves evacuating the outer regions of the galaxy and making a concentrated defense in the galactic core. Species that choose isolation would be relocated to designated safe zones. Councillor Vex spoke up from her position near the back of the chamber. What about the alliance that Councillor Thane has been developing? Could a coalition of species successfully resist Council authority? Zephyr had been dreading this question because the answer was so definitive. According to human intelligence, the current coalition being assembled has a combined military strength roughly equivalent to what the Calarian Empire possessed 6 months ago. The Council could defeat them using less than 5% of their available forces. Then why haven't they simply eliminated these potential threats already? Because they're still hoping for a peaceful resolution. The Council genuinely prefers integration over destruction. But their patience isn't unlimited. Councillor Thane stood up, his forearms spread in a gesture of defiance. So we have 3 choices: become servants, become prisoners, or be destroyed. These are the options offered by our supposed liberators. Those aren't the only choices, Zephyr replied. There's a 4th option that Captain Chen mentioned during our recent conversation, which is, prove that we're ready for true partnership rather than just integration. Zephyr manipulated the display to show a different set of data, this one depicting various species that held special status within the galactic community. There are approximately 50 species that have been granted full partnership status with the Council. They participate in decision-making, help establish policies for emerging civilizations, and play leadership roles in galactic defense planning. What does it take to achieve partnership status? Demonstrate that you can think beyond your own species' interests. Show that you're capable of making decisions that benefit galactic civilization as a whole, even when those decisions might not directly benefit your own people. And how would we demonstrate that? Zephyr took a deep breath before delivering the proposal that Captain Chen had outlined, by helping to guide other emerging civilizations through the integration process, by sharing our experience and helping them avoid the conflicts we've encountered, by proving that we've learned from our mistakes and are committed to galactic stability. The implications were staggering. The Calarian Empire, which had spent 3 millennia conquering and subjugating other species, would be asked to become mentors and guides for civilizations facing the same challenges they had just overcome. "You're asking us to become what the humans are to us," Counselor Lyra observed. "In a sense, yes. But we'd be working with species that are culturally and technologically closer to our own level. We could provide a perspective that the more advanced council species might not be able to offer." The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Arguments flew back and forth across the chamber as council members, military leaders, and colonial representatives wrestled with the decision that would determine the fate of their civilization. Councillor Thane and his supporters argued for resistance, claiming that any form of submission would be the death of Calarian culture and independence. They spoke of honor, of the warrior tradition that had built their empire, of the duty to fight for their people's freedom regardless of the odds. Others argued for isolation, suggesting that preservation of their core worlds and population was more important than maintaining their imperial ambitions. They pointed to the thousands of species that had chosen this path and continued to thrive within their designated territories. But gradually, as the debate continued, a consensus began to emerge around the fourth option. The idea of earning partnership status appealed to the Calarian sense of achievement and progress. It offered a path that preserved their dignity while acknowledging the reality of their situation. When Council Leader Arcturus finally called for a vote, the result was closer than Zephyr had expected. 7 votes for pursuing partnership status, 3 for isolation, and 2 for resistance. "The decision is made," Arcturus announced. "The Calarian Empire will pursue integration with the Galactic Coordination Council with the goal of achieving full partnership status." As the session ended and the various representatives filed out of the chamber, Zephyr found himself approached by Councillor Thane. The older Calarian's expression was grim but not hostile. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" Thane asked. "You've ended the Calarian Empire as we knew it." "Yes," Zephyr replied, "but I've also ensured that the Calarian people will survive to become something new. And you think that's worth the price we're paying?" Zephyr looked up at the dome above them, where the stars shone with their eternal light. Somewhere among those stars, the human fleet continued its patrol, watching over a galaxy that was far more complex and dangerous than any Calarian had ever imagined. 3 months ago, I thought we were the masters of the galaxy," he said. "Now I know we're just children learning to take our first steps in a vast ancient universe. Yes, I think survival and growth are worth the price of admitting we have much to learn." The next day, Zephyr sent a coded transmission to Captain Chen, informing her of the Council's decision. Her response came back within hours, and it carried a warmth that he hadn't heard in their previous conversations. "Congratulations, Admiral. You've made a choice that will benefit not just your own people, but the entire galaxy. I look forward to working with you as we prepare for the challenges ahead." As Zephyr stood on his balcony that evening, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The Calarian Empire was ending, but the Calarian people were about to begin a new chapter in their history. And in the depths of space, the human fleet maintained its vigil, no longer watching potential enemies, but protecting new allies as they took their first steps toward joining the galactic community that spanned the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and for the first time in their history, the Calarians would have a chance to explore it, not as conquerors, but as partners in something greater than themselves. In the end, their first glimpse of a human warship had been exactly what they needed. A mirror that showed them who they really were, and a window that revealed who they could become.